Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We are now on our second panel discussion for the day, and we are talking foundational training and skills development. And I have an amazing panel of speakers joining me this morning. They have expertise in relation to this particular topic. Please don't forget to engage with us on the chat room, and don't forget to hashtag Skills Summit 22 if you do have questions for our panelists. We will be receiving them in studio and we'll make sure that those questions get answered. Don't forget to engage with our expo as well so that you stand a chance to win great prizes. With me discussing foundational training and skills development, I have Mr. Anton Kyler, who's the founder of Sozo Foundation. I also have Ms. Stella Carthy, who is from the International Examinations Board, known as IEB. We also have Sharon Blignut, who's the principal and director of Triple E Training. Well, Sharon is not yet logged in, I think. And we also have Mr. Mark Anderson, who is a principal at Koya Academy. Welcome to all of you. Oh, Sharon, you're right here. Welcome. Sorry, I didn't see you log in there. So perhaps, Mark, let me start with you. Please give us your opening remarks. After Mark, we'll have Mr. Anton, Stella, and Sharon.
Thank you, Tabang, and thank you for hosting us. We really do appreciate the opportunity to be here and to share some of our ideas and experience and perspective. I'm really looking forward to hearing some of the other panelists who are on with me. I know that I've got some connections to some of the others. Koa Academy is actually an IEB school, so I'm looking forward to hearing a little bit from Stella in a moment, but from the others as well, particularly from the perspective of what happens beyond schooling. As Tabang said, my name is Mark, and I'm the principal of an online school. We operate from grades 4 to 12. And so our perspective on this topic is very much from the angle of what are we doing in schools currently to prepare our children for the future workplace? What are we doing in terms of education from both the legislative side right to what's happening on the ground in order to best prepare South Africans for the future workplace? And what's most interesting for us at the moment is, firstly, we know that the workplace is changing every single day. We're all experiencing this ourselves in the workplace. I'm sure that over the last few years, each one of us could say what our personal experience of the workplace has been like and how it's shifted dramatically just in the last few years. And obviously that's been accelerated through the pandemic. But even before that, you look at the last 10, 15 years of progression in the workplace, and we see significant shifts in what's happening and how companies are hiring and what employees are doing in the workplace, how they're accessing those opportunities and more. And from our side, what we're excited about is as those shifts are happening in the workplace, we're seeing shifts happening in education as well. So when we talk about foundational training, I think right back down to the foundation phase. We talk about grade 1, 2, 3, and we talk about the basics of numeracy and literacy, and then we build on that and we head towards subject choices in the FET and what role subject choices have in our future careers. And what we're seeing in education in schools is massive shifts as well. Not only are we seeing those big shifts in the workplace, we're seeing big shifts in education as well. And I'm really excited as a principal, as somebody who's been involved in education for many years. There has not been a great deal of change in education. We look back over the last 40, 50 years of education and we don't see significant change. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, schools got computer labs and we all went, that's amazing. But actually, that's not a significant shift in how we educate. It's not a significant shift in how we think about teaching for the future. And so I'm really excited that with all of this change and upheaval and disturbance, we're seeing some of that change now happening in education circles. And so I'm excited to be a part of that. And I think that there's opportunity for us to reshape what schools are doing so that we can better prepare our kids for the future.
Thank you very much, Mark. You actually gave us a couple of gems there that we can pick up in the discussions. Mr. Anton, over to you.
Morning, everybody, and Tabang, thank you, yes, for the opportunity. I noted from the panel that I'm probably a little bit like the odd one out here. We my colleagues here are more into the formal education space. I'm sitting right now in a township community, being a community-based organization, probably you could say in the informal education space. We've been based in this specific community of 50,000 people without a high school. So that's a big challenge. Now, we have overcrowded schools, as we know, and we have challenges in our education formal sector. We have intervened and provided an after-school support space for high school learners. So our focus is very much youth-driven, and unfortunately, our mantra has to change all the time, not for a good reason, but recently our mantra has become, we exist for the 75, or hashtag 75 must fall. This is referring to the 75% youth unemployment rate, which is a disaster, and is a snowball that is going to hit us in the near future, because we are raising fathers and mothers that are modeling unemployment. So in our own way that we challenge ourselves, having run a successful after-school high school program, keeping young people in high school, matriculating and into university education or tertiary education of some sort further. We also challenged ourselves about 6-7 years ago, and the phrase we had at the time was, if we keep skimming the cream from the crop, we left the rest of the crop to rot. We're in the Cape Flats, so we're surrounded by that gang endemic, and the challenge we face is, what are we offering in terms of skills development, in terms of re-education or re-entry into some form of education, training or further development for those who have already fallen out of the formal sector. So the answer, I believe, to moving things forward nationally is not the one or the other. We all know it's very much more nuanced than that, and much more complex, and we need collaboration from all sectors. And so this is our part to play. And so we run a skills development, vocational skills program with annually with about 120, 130 young people. It's a very intensive program. It's a one-year program, and our specific skills are very much market driven. So we try to remain very agile and very responsive to the market, the job market, that meaning. And so we are driven by some of the sort of skills that we do is, we have a coffee barista school, we have a artisanal baking skills school, we have a beauty and manicure pedicure salon school, we have a construction skills school, we have a coding skills school. So these are very much market driven schools that have been birthed out of the need for employable young people, because I believe there's two challenges we face. It's the looming 75% unemployment, but it's also at the same time, once again, it's not the one or the other. It's the unemployability challenge that many of the small and medium enterprises have communicated to us over the years. They struggle to find suitable candidates at these entry-level jobs and these vocational hand-skilled jobs that can be taught without a certificate, without a qualification, and without the need for an academic career or background. And we've successfully been placing young people over the last 5 years. Our rolling year-on-year placement rate is about 85% into jobs or further education. Many of them go back into college. They find their passion through our construction school and go and do plumbing or electrical, or they go into a cookery school or a baking school or a further hospitality catering school, or they go back in. Some of them have even come through our doors doing our GED program and then going back into university. But most of them are going into the job market, into the bakeries, restaurants, hotels, into the small businesses, small medium enterprises, and we journey with them for a year intensively, not just with the vocational skills, but the foundational, basic, fundamental life skills around social skills, emotional intelligence, and also dealing very much in the psychosocial intervention space with the amount of trauma that we live with in a nation, and our communities right here are traumatized, and it's trauma that has been built up over years and over years. And so there's layers of trauma to work through. So we have a very dedicated team of psychosocial intervention social workers that work with our beneficiaries and families. So we're very much focused on this one community of 50,000, of which there is approximately 18,000 young people, and many of them are in gangs. So we're making a difference in a small way, but we're changing generational cycles in a big way.
Absolutely, absolutely. And thank you for the work that you do. We look forward to engaging further. Stella?
Thank you. Good morning to everybody, and thank you for the invitation. I just need to say that I am a board member of the independent, not international, but independent examinations board. So I don't get involved in the operational stuff that happens at the IAB at all. But I've had most of my, besides being a teacher for a number of years, I then went into the mining industry where I was head of skills development for an employer organization. But my experience has ranged from apprentice training, ABET, training operators, graduates, postgrads, managerial level. So it's across the whole span. I've also been involved in Setas, Umalusi, the Quality Council for Trades and Occupation, the National Skills Authority, and I've represented BUSA, Business Unity South Africa, in many fora. But I think being an employer, wearing an employer hat, and having a look at what comes into industry from the schooling sector going into post-schooling, generally employers complain that people are not ready, and I think it was either Anton or Mark, I can't remember, talking about so many unemployed people, but they are unemployable. And I think that has been quite the case in many instances, especially in industries where they're taking in a lower level of skills. And I think, what Mark and Anton are saying is great, because that's the kind of thing that is required, because a lot of youngsters simply don't know anything about the world of work. They just have no background or experience in it, and to train people in areas, but in a simulated environment, to give them some understanding, I think is great, and I think helps a lot towards the foundational training. Having said that, I think it's very difficult to prepare somebody for work in a real live way, because you can prepare yourself as much as you want to for marriage, but and many other things, but until you get into it, you actually don't know. And there are so many different factors that influence that, your partner, where you live in your relations, and so on. And that's the same as a job, and you're needing different foundational skills in different areas of work, so the people going into university, getting a university degree and going into work also need the foundational skills. Some of them have no cooking clue what happens in the world of work, and expect to walk in and they must run the show and get their BMW and so on and so forth, because they're graduates. And you can understand it if they're the first graduate in the family and so on. So there also needs to be some foundational type of learning there. However, when we talk about foundational learning, we generally think of the read, write, speak, communication kind of things that are required, and that is indeed necessary. And hence, we've got the FLC, the Foundational Learning Competence, and I can talk at length about that. But employers generally are wanting things like collaboration, communication, creativity, critical thinking, all the C's. And how do you do that? It's very difficult to teach those or train those not within a context.
Sure.
So I think it's a bit of a difficult thing, to expect youngsters to qualify in whatever, whether it's baking or a nail salon or an engineer and to walk into a job and to be able to do everything. You know, we still need the contextual training of, or the contextual learning how to apply skills. Thank you.
Wow. I'm so, two things, Stella. One, I wish you were my teacher when I was in, in the foundational phase. Two, I think you need to add marriage coach to your profile, because you got me thinking about my relationship status there for a second. Thank you so much, Stella. That was absolutely profound. Can we please have Sharon?
Okay. I'm sorry, I'm having.
Oh, you're having. No, we can't hear you properly. And we can't see you either. We can't see you at all, Sharon.
The lights freeze up every now and again.
Okay, there we go. Oh boy. Are you still with us, Sharon? Okay. Might I suggest, please, can you log off and then log back in, just so that perhaps the network might be a bit more stable. I was so looking forward to that, but we'll definitely have you back on. I think whilst we're waiting for Sharon, we can just hop right into the panel discussion. And of course, when she's back, we'll give her an opportunity to introduce herself. Just going back to you, Mark, you spoke about, the role of subject choice and what, or rather the benefits it has in terms of, future careers. How do you think we can better align subjects and align that back to future careers, or what industry requires, for example?
So, Bang, this is a really challenging question in schools. I think there's a sort of how we can manage it right now with the current structures and systems that we have. And then I'd like to make a couple of comments about where I'm hoping education goes in the next sort of 10, 20 years. When we think about where we are right now, we're still very much operating in a linear school progression, where you come into school, everybody does the same set of subjects for the same number of years, assumably at the same level. So we're all expecting everybody to be operating same subject, same age group, same level. And then you get to grade 10 and you make your subject choices. And historically, this has been crucial in terms of your future career, because if you're going to end up doing a certain job one day, then that defines your subject choices right back to grade 10. So you end up picking your subject choices based on your most likely career path. And what we're seeing now in the world of work is that people are no longer in one career for life. I mean, if you ask Anton, are you preparing people for one particular career for 40 years, or are you preparing people to be job ready and able to enter the marketplace, able to enter the workplace? The answer is we're training skills, and Anton's mentioned soft skills, he's mentioned hard skills, but we're not training for just one career. We're training for workplace readiness. And so when we think about our subject choices in schools, what we can do now is we can look at a child and say, what is the best possible scenario for them in terms of exit points? And for some children, that's a grade 12 matric, which has certain subject choices that let them get into a certain field of study in university. For other children, it might be a grade 10 certificate, which then leads to skills training to go straight into the marketplace. And so we are able to do some of that now. What I'm really excited about for the future of education, though, is the idea that we're shifting slowly from a very linear education progression to a multi-path education progression, where you have multiple options available to you, and those options are increasing all the time. And the idea that you don't have to follow the same path as everybody else to get to, be able to enter the workplace. A great example of this is university. When you think of the select few in our country that end up having the opportunity to study at university, there are massive dropout rates from first year to second year to third year. And people are spending huge amounts of money on first year and second year studies And if they're dropping out after second year studies, there's nothing to show for that. You've spent all of that time, all of that resource on not getting your bachelor's, your undergrad degree. And what we're wanting to see in education is a shift from that linear progression where first year leads to second year, leads to third year, and then you have to pass third year to get your certificate. We want to see multiple options at the beginning where actually in first year, you end up with certificates that you can use to apply for workplaces. So if first year university is as far as you get, whether it's resources or academics or time constraints, whatever the reason is for you not being able to get to third year, we want you to finish first year with something that you walk out of the university with your first year, and this is what I've achieved, this is what I've accomplished, and this is now what I can use to apply to get into the workplace. So we're wanting to see that breakdown of the linear progression to multiple options which lead to in multiple directions. We already see that in the way that courses are run in massive online courses. You know, the idea that you can go onto a massive online course and you've got literally tens of thousands of options available to you, and they all end with some sort of accreditation certification that you then have to add to your resource pack, your CV, whatever the case. We're wanting to see that in formal education circles. We want to see that in universities. We want to see that in schools where there are more routes, more options available.
Sure. Thank you very much, Mark. Sharon, can we just have you come in here? Let's see if we can hear you on our side. Hi, Sharon, are you with us? Please unmute yourself. Okay, so she's still logged in, but okay, no problem. I think let's go to Anton whilst we waiting for Sharon to come back and join us. Anton, how can we, or rather, how can school better equip students for employability? Because that's a term that you really emphasized on. So how can we use the foundational phase or just skills development as a whole to better equip opportunities for employability?
Yeah, no, thanks, Tabang. Great question. And I think just here's a great example of just the three of us sitting here at different spaces and environments. Yet we're all trying to address the same issue. And I believe, you know, with the complexity of our challenges, collaboration is vital in these spaces. What I loved about what Mark said, and I'm going to piggyback on something Stella shared earlier on. Mark shared something that is innovative, right? So what I'm hearing from Mark, apart from the practical suggestions, is I'm hearing we need to rethink the way we do things. We do education, we do training, we do development. We need to rethink, and sometimes the old problems and the way we thought about them, we need to rethink those and come up with new solutions to some old problems. But it's not in new innovative ideas, it's actually just rethinking. And now what I mean by this, not wanting to be abstract, is Stella mentioned about how can we expect young people to go into the workforce, into the marketplace, and be prepared for that environment. So I'll give you a quick example of one of the principles, and this is about principles that I believe can be applied in all the stages of learning. Let's take our coffee barista school. Now we're working with young people who are based in a community of disadvantaged environments and lack of resources and skills and resources, etc. So we're training them up as baristas, and they are experts by the time that we turn young people into coffee snobs, right? That's what we do, okay? And here they go out into a coffee shop. Now, these young people have never set foot in one of those coffee shops, right? Any standard middle-class coffee shop that you think of, they have never been in those environments. So they go into that environment feeling completely suddenly inadequate. Suddenly they're feeling completely out of their depth. Suddenly they don't understand work ethic. They don't understand conflict. They don't understand difficult customers, or even just, not so difficult customers, just relating to clients and customers differently. So one of the principles that we apply in our model is that we do work placement as a critical part of our training module, so that all our students in every one of our schools go out into the marketplace. We place them with partners and businesses and small businesses, medium businesses, and they have 2 weeks of work jobs. It's the old school job shadowing, right? It's not a new invention. It's an old thing. We're just rethinking it. And what we're doing is we don't give them that experience at the end of the course. We give it to them sort of just after halfway, like 2/3 into the year. They go out into the marketplace. They then come back into the safe, supported space. They then get to debrief. They then get to share their experience, because a lot of these experiences now causes identity issues. It causes them to have self-doubt and self-confidence and all these sort of things. And unless we are able to help them with the professional support on site to now dialogue through that, to process through that, to discuss that, and to make sense of this other world that they didn't even know feels like, looks like, sounds like, and experiences like they have. And then we continue to build into them. And by the time they then get to the end of the year, we can then release them with, it's not even enough. What we're doing is still not enough, but it makes a huge difference in our success rate, because when they go into the workplace, they now understand what manager's language is like, what a boss expects, what communication and is appropriate in terms of WhatsApp and communicating time and rocking up at time and pressure and all these sort of things. And I'm sharing that from a very foundational space of just basic skills. But what Stella's saying is this I believe is happening at the university level, where young people go out and they go and work in a corporate, they've got the degree and they get an internship, and they bomb out after the first 6 months because they can't handle the pressure, they haven't developed the resilience, they don't understand themselves and how to respond to these environments. And so I almost want to say that one of the things I would advocate for is that job shadowing or job placement becomes an intricate part of every single curriculum. Now, it might be easier for Mark and then because they're a private academy and they can chop and change and tweak things. But how do we start rolling this concept out of work placement as a vital part of the curriculum? I think that is a key, a game changer at many levels for us.
Thank you so much. Just before I call Sharon back, maybe Stella, you can come in here. Inferred from what Anton is saying, how do we then provide contextual learning, the term that you used in your intro statement? Just based on what Anton has been saying, how do we then contextualize the learning space? Oh, you're on mute, Stella. There we go.
Thank you. It does happen, and in many instances it happens well. So if you get a candidate attorney, you get a CA doing the internship, you get apprentices. They all get their theory, their practical skills, and then on the job. So that works well. So if you think of a hairdresser, he or she knows how to cut hair, blow dry, perm, straighten, and whatever else, dye hair and whatever else. They can do all those things, but in the workplace, they're going to be having one person's hair dyed, another person being washed, they blow drying somebody's hair, and the phone goes. You've got to learn to manage all those things together. That's real life.
Yeah.
Even if it's in a simulated hair salon, you don't get those things, and then your card machine doesn't work, and then we have no electricity, which is the thing. But you see, I think I'm going to go back a little bit in that when we talk about training and the certificate that you get or the qualification you get, and we're talking about schools, certificates or qualifications have different uses. So a matric doesn't qualify you to do anything, but what it does allow you, it gives you entry into further learning. The same as a
Yeah.
BA, even a BSc engineering, that doesn't qualify you to do it. It allows you entry into further learning. And I think that in many instances, we expect those people with those certificates to be work ready, and they're not, because they haven't been taught, they haven't been trained. But there's a perception, particularly among employers, and I think people themselves, that I'm now an engineer or a doctor or whatever it is. Whereas if you look at a nurse, a teacher, you do your training, you do your on-job, your pracs, and then when you get your certificate, you are able to go and practice as. It's not entry into. And I think we need to make distinctions with those certificates, the training and so on that we get. However, when you get somebody who's qualified as a barista and he or she has had some workplace exposure through shadowing and all that, they are far more attractive to employers than somebody who's completely green.
Absolutely. Did you say completely green?
And well, unexposed to the workplace.
It's a beautiful idiom, actually. Thank you very much, Stella. Sharon, can we have you come in there?
Yes, I'm going to speak from the phone. I think this is safer.
Fine.
It seems to be a connectivity problem from our side.
Oh, no problem. Okay, Sharon, no, you can go ahead. Please introduce yourself, and you can also just share your insights on the topic we are discussing.
Okay, I'm going to introduce myself and then I'll pitch in later because I don't have the full thread of the conversation.
Okay.
But I am with Triple E Training. I am a principal here at the moment. I'm also one of the founder members, and we have been around for 30 years, looking specifically after adult learning skills, basics in English, numeracy, mathematics, which is a really fundamental part of everybody's ability to engage in a lifelong learning process. We kind of sit in both worlds. Our main accreditation lies with Malusi, which is a far more rigid process. And then we deliver within the skills environment, which requires us to do a lot of shaping and forming to fit into workplace environments. But like I said, we've been doing that successfully for 30 years, and I'm very proud of that. The whole concept of adult learning is really to catch those people who it's not about the illiterate or the people who never went to school, but it's really about those people who didn't maybe successfully complete, maybe lost out on education somewhere along the way, and the people that have gone off the grid and have now popped up, and we want to get them into learning programs and get them more engaged in learning and in work. And I think that is the important aspect and element of any fundamental skills that you're looking at when you're looking at a person and the qualification and becoming engaged in work. It should be that conceptual engagement.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Sharon. We'll definitely come back to you because I'd really like to know that in the existence of the entity for 30 years, what are the success stories of the adults that were your students, and were they absorbed into different sectors? How has that been? So we'll definitely come back to you. Let me quickly go back to Mark because I know you need to be excused right about now, actually. So probably please answer this question as you give us your closing remarks. I also just wanted to find out from you, you said it's very important for us to note that we have to sort of shift in how we educate. What did you mean by that?
That's a really good question. I think this ties in nicely with what I wanted to say as my closing comments anyway. So I think there are two thoughts maybe to summarize here. Just one is a very high level thoughts about some of the change that we see in education at the moment that I'm particularly excited about in the online space. So when we think about online education, and that's the idea of unbundling education, where up until now, education has been very bundled. And so for you to receive an education, you go to a service provider that bundles as much together as possible and then offers it at as low a price as possible, but that price is often too high for the majority of South Africans. And so most technologies, most systems in the evolution of their life cycle, they start with being very bundled. The perfect example is TV. You know, you've got cable TV, which bundles together all of your shows as much as possible. You've got your series and your movies and your sports and your drama, and you're going to buy all of that for one low price. And as we see technology and systems evolve, it becomes more accessible for people to unbundle that. And now I'm actually streaming, you know, my series through one service provider, and I'm accessing my sport through another. I'm able to do that at a lower price, and I'm able to pick the services that suit me specifically. And so we are seeing an education shift towards unbundling of the education, where up until now, think especially of high school here, up until now, you know, you are very bound by two things: your geography and how much you can afford in terms of school fees. And those two factors, more than any other, determine which school you can apply to go to. And now what we're seeing, particularly in the online space, is the unbundling of the education structure, where you're able to offer components of an education for a more affordable price. And if people have access to the internet, it's more accessible to everyone. So that's the one thing that I wanted to mention. The other is something that I'm particularly passionate about with my work, and that's something that connects to Anton and Stella have both spoken about soft skills. It's bled through everything that they've been saying up until now. You know, you think about Anton's story about the coffee barista who's well-trained in coffee, and now he's got to engage with a difficult customer and a boss who has high expectations. What we're talking about there are soft skills. We're talking about critical thinking. We're talking about collaboration and communication. Stella sees. And those transfer across industries. Those are not about coffee. Those are about being people. And so more than anything now, I think it's critical for schools to be thinking through what soft skills are we teaching our kids and how are we teaching them that? Because regardless of their exit point, it doesn't matter whether you're going to go and do your doctorate at university or you're going to go into a skills readiness course straight out of grade 9. It doesn't matter what your exit point is. Those soft skills are critical for everyone. As the world is becoming more digitized, more automated, the thing that makes us valuable to employers is our humanity. It's us being human. And it's those soft skills that we contribute to the job that make us valuable in that job. So we have to be prioritizing those soft skills as schools. They're not prioritized in our curriculum. But we have to, as educators, be prioritizing those soft skills. If I'm doing a study in geography on rivers, I need to have at the front of my mind, how am I pulling soft skills out of this experience for my kids, so that they're learning those soft skills, so that when they do walk into an environment that they're not familiar with, that they're not comfortable with, they have the soft skills to cope and to manage that situation.
Sure. Thank you very much, Mark, for your time. We truly appreciate your insights, and we'll thank you properly once we wrap up everything. But
thank you so much.
Excuse
and
with
thanks
much.
to all the panelists. Appreciate your time.
Sure. Awesome, awesome. Antoine, before I come to you, maybe let's go back to Sharon and just give an opportunity there. Sharon, I think I'd asked you a question earlier about just some of, the success stories that your institution has had. And in my mind, the first thing I think is, can we afford to be who we want to be? Can we afford to be educated? Because the reality of the matter is there is a large number of young people or old people who then say, I actually wanted to be a pilot, but I couldn't be. Is education so expensive that we can't afford to be who we truly want to be? Sharon?
That's a very interesting question. And I think affordability is always and will always be a point of discussion. And yes, I don't think we will ever have the money to be what we want to be. We all want to be Elon Musk, but we also have a reality to deal with. And I think that for me, what I've seen through the years is that sometimes our expectations and what we think, because perhaps we are educated and perhaps we have these skills in place, we miss the aspirations of those who have not got big aspirations. And I would like to use a story. We had a retail organization just before COVID, who had a learner who had been struggling to get through the exams. In fact, she had been going through exams for 7 years. We took over the project, and I think it was a fear of the exam that really prevented her from being successful. And her biggest dream was to be a cashier. That was her big dream. And I think that we are often too arrogant to allow those dreams to be the big dreams of someone, because we expect people to become the big things. Not everyone wants to be a big thing, a doctor or professor or a lawyer or something. Some people are looking towards something that makes them happy. And in this case, the lady was successful in her exam, and the jubilation, because she knew that this was putting her on the path for her career for the next step. She was moving from being a packer to a cashier. And that growth that you see around that. And our business is we work with businesses to make that happen. So we provide that training on site at a business. And that is such a goosebump moment to experience that, because for us, it's a simple exam that she's passed and maybe a fundamental skill. For her, it's the key to her future. And I think the stigma, unfortunately, around the lower level people. I actually read a comment yesterday on the chat where someone actually spoke about people with not a sufficient education as slow learners, and someone else actually, took differed with her. So for me, it's. I think we are a lot of the time it's part of the problem, but I think this is a common problem among all qualifications.
Sure.
And I mean, if you want to go to university, it's going to cost you a lot of money. If you want to get ready to go into the artisan programs and the learnerships, there might be a cost involved. And the biggest cost is often your attitude and your perception and your willingness to engage in the program. And perhaps, we've been spending a lot of money on skills, but perhaps we should be looking at quality of what we are delivering more than quantity.
Thank you so much for that, Sharon. I think just on what you spoke about, in politics, we call it politics of the other. Classification and classism has really messed up society. And when we learn to not other things and people and opportunities, I think we then contribute to building a functional society, and we also contribute or rather healthily contribute to aspects of mental health. So thank you very much for mentioning that comment. Anton, I'm going to ask you this question. Please incorporate it with your closing remarks, and Stella, I will do the same. Earlier on, you spoke about informal education. And as you answer this question, please link it to what Ms. Stella said about there's a dichotomy or difference between practice and entry into. And we haven't learned to bridge the gap. Do you think informal education helps with the praxis and the entry into industry and different sectors? Anton, over to you.
I have a concept I want to ask ourselves, a critical question.
Okay.
Are we wanting to build a wealthy nation, or are we wanting to build a healthy nation? And I'll tell you the distinction between the two. It's very same distinction that runs through in corporates, that runs through in individual lives and families, etc. When you pursue a wealthy nation, you will pursue profit. When you pursue a healthy nation, you will pursue purpose. And what Sharon was alluding to, I believe, is purpose. Purpose-driven lives. And this is where we need to help our young people and our future workforces to remove the blinkers of thinking that success equals money. That is not a healthy, functional society. Ultimately, it is going to leave them burnt out. It's going to leave them broken. It's going to leave them disappointed, rejected, or dejected. And so it's really about building into young people in the journey of learning and training and education these elements of, and I'd like to upgrade, I fully agree with what Mark said on soft skills. I feel that we need to bring a new language in there that is essential skills. If we keep calling it soft skills, it's going to be, it's on the soft side. But when it's essential or critical skills, then we start dealing with the heart and the mind work as well. And those are the things that come into place that Stella mentioned in the beginning. When a young person goes, whether it's out of college, out of university, or out of an NGO like ourselves, or like a triple E learning from Sharon, when they go out, a young person or an adult, into the workplace, what happens there, that experiential effect, and where does it affect the person? It's not on their practical physical skills, it's not on their qualification, it's on the mind and the heart and the human identity. And so pursuing purpose over profit, I believe, is the way to help us into that space. And then it's very abstract in a sense, but it looks like these basic things by valuing things like workplace experience. And again, you know, where I started, and my final comments is a bit of a shout out to the powers that be that are on this fantastic summit, the ministers, etc. You know, is it not time that we also bring in government support out into the workplace for the small and medium enterprises, where there are benefits for them to actually provide 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks of work job shadowing, tax benefits, tax rebate, BEE points, all these tools that we have. Let's incentivize the employers, because to have a young person or a adult come into the workplace is an inconvenience, right? And they're all trying to make it work as much as they can. But we need to incentivize them, and we've managed to do that through relationships in our local community. And you know, we call it one taxi region area, one taxi trip is our ring fence, and we built good relationships with the SMEs, and so we understand an inconvenience for them, but they caught into the bigger story, and they caught into the purpose of it, and they become our actually biggest placement areas, because they see these young people and they catch the heart of the young person and they help develop them. So they buy into the story. They're not just now on their own mission and their own vision, but they buy into the purpose behind all of this. And I think there's something in connecting all of these sectors to see what is the bigger picture. And for that we need national collaboration on a grand scale.
Thank you so much, Anton. Truly, truly profound. Thank you for that. Stella, just as you prepare your closing remarks, please also answer and integrate this question. You spoke about critical thinking. How do we build critical thinkers at a foundational level from school? You know, whether it's primary, pre, even high school, before they get into university and into industry? How do we, or even just generally, how do we build critical thinkers?
I mean, it's a very difficult thing. How do you build critical thinkers? But in terms of what we do at the IAB, in terms of assessment, one of the things that we need to do in schools is to think of higher order thinking skills. So it happens low down in the primary school, where you don't just ask for simple recall, you've got to ask for a higher order thinking skill. So if the children are doing a comprehension, and we know that comprehension at school is not particularly good in many schools, but you're not going to ask them, where did the child go to do fishing and it was in the river, a simple thing. You rather ask them, how do you know it was summer? You know it was summer because he didn't have a jersey, he was swimming, he was sweating or whatever. So, it starts from that level right through school. So it's got to be done within the context of history and geography and literature and poetry and so on. So it starts from school in the primary phase, I think, and then carries on through whatever tertiary institution you go to. But in terms of my closing comments, one of the things that I want to say for foundational learning is that probably about 50% of the children who enter grade 1 do not reach matric. They drop out. And if our pass rate is in the region of 60 to 70%, it means that just over 30, 35 or whatever percent are getting a matric. So there's a lot of people who are not getting a matric. And those are the problems. Many of them are not fortunate enough to get into Anton and Mark schools and where Sharon helps with the foundational stuff that they need, and that's a problem. Those are the unemployable people. And I mean, that's another discussion. The other thing that I want to comment on is that in this country, we are really stuck on qualifications. And I mean, I've been involved in organizations where we deal with qualifications, the Quality Council for Trades and Occupation, the IAB, schools, or Malusi. But what about those people who can't get qualifications? And that goes to that affordability. The people who sit outside Builders Warehouse, what do we do? What do we do with them? They are going to be employed as plumbers or regas your car aircon or whatever. And they are there. The informal sector, and particularly so if you look in countries like India, a lot of people and a lot of the GDP comes from the informal sector like that. So we have to fuss on this notion of qualifications. And I'm not saying we do away with them, but we've also got to take into account that kind of thing. And I do believe that through the use of technology, and Mark was alluding to that, we can bring down the cost of training. And you can do a lot of training with cell phones, and making Wi-Fi available. And it's those sort of things where government and or corporates need to step in because of the affordability and sorting out the informal sector where they still need some sort of training, not necessarily a qualification, but training. And then my last comment is what I think Mark said has been bleeding through the whole discussion, is the so-called soft skills, the critical skills. Now, when we had the unit standard qualifications, one of the components there was critical cross-field outcomes that essentially spoke to this critical thinking and collaboration, communication, and those sort of things. And I think it's a needed thing. We definitely need it. But one of the difficulties is that it's part of a qualification, and part of a qualification, you then need to assess it. And those things are very difficult to assess. So because it's difficult to assess, we tend not to teach it. We gloss over it, even within a school and within a university context and other tertiary institutions. It's very difficult to assess those so-called critical skills or the critical cross-field outcomes.
That's right.
I'm sure we'll come up with something somewhere someday.
Yeah.
And I think it's not something that is assessed and it comes to an end. We're always learning about it right throughout life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you very much, Stella. Thank you. We appreciate your insight there. Sharon, last words, last comments from you?
Yes, thank you very much. I mean, I think Mark has made a very valid point about looking at purpose instead of profit, because I think that is where the whole, in education and training, it's about knowledge, it's about skills, and it's about attitudes and values that we need to build. And if we're not building in attitudes and values, we're really just working towards the profit side. And we are starting to look at the quantity of people we are putting through and not the quality of what we are putting out at the end of the day. And I think that's a very important thing. I also want to agree with Stella on in terms of the qualifications. We're wanting to send everyone to university. We're wanting to push everyone down that path, when in fact there are so many other opportunities outside of that. I think it was one of the ladies yesterday, I'm sorry, I forgot which country she was from. They were looking at the craft industry and how people with those craft skills are the people who are making up the informal sector, and they are making money and, sustenance living really. But there are some of them that have gone beyond. So I think we need to really relook at how we perceive qualifications and people, what they are fit for purpose to do. I think I've been looking at some statistics, and this is not South African statistics I looked at. And I think that what we've not really done really well yet, because I have a lot of faith in South Africa, and I do believe that we have the skills and the impetus to get to the end of this together. But we often focus so much on the procedural part of learning, which is the lower level thinking skills. We're just getting everyone, in my case, and I'll use my example, if someone is not able to read, we want them to read the words, whether it's going to take them 20 minutes to read a paragraph, they can read, but really building higher order thinking skills, it's a conceptual thing, and that requires the fluency that goes into that, the comprehension, the depth beyond what has been written on paper. And we've not really gotten there. But I do want to say we've come a long way as South Africa, and we've done a lot of things, and I always have faith that we'll get there, and we have the resources to build that back into our schooling programs. And very importantly, across all these countries I've been looking at, by grade 6, if you haven't really got someone, and in my case it's about ABIT 2-3, if you haven't got them committed and bought into learning and developing and realizing that they've got to bring their part and their they have a role to play in this as well, you actually lose that motivation to learn, to grow. And this is, I think, where in our case, we see a lot of people in their 30s coming back and saying, I never finished school. Now I'm a grown up. When I was younger, I didn't think it was important. Now, I think it's important. Can you help me get somewhere? And for me, that's always, once one light goes on, there's no longer darkness. And even that small movement. So I think we're getting there. I think we, as a country, I saw this morning that there was a meeting about the quality of education and measuring that. And I'm very excited about all these things that are happening. And thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you for being patient with me connecting and disconnecting, and for the invitation. I truly appreciate it.
Awesome.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much, Sharon. Thank you to all of you. And I have no doubt that you have impacted the organizations that we are working with and continue to be the light of the world. And we appreciate your knowledge. Please accept our invitation when we call again. And all the best for your future endeavors. Thank you very much. Thank you. You take care. Bye. Thanks. Ladies and gentlemen, that was the panel discussion for foundational training and skills development. And I really want to close off with Mr. Anton's words. Building a wealthy economy is truly profitable, but building a healthy economy is purposeful. And I think that was truly, truly profound. Continue to hashtag Skill Summit 2022. We are now about to have our panel discussion on empowering women through skills development. Stay tuned. Don't leave your screens.